It's all about experiences, which forms our narratives and our perceptions.
Right.
And so if we can create an experience for people as leaders that every time they meet with us, they feel good leading, even if it's a difficult subject. I'm not saying there aren't challenges, but it's how we make people feel as leaders. That's culture. That's an attractive culture that will attract people, retain people. And here's the thing, you win when you have that kind of culture, deliverance, and experience.
Now you realize this is merely a transactional relationship with the culture of the post office at 5 minutes to 5. And then walk into an Apple store, and what you get is no longer just a place to sell you electronics. You get religion. Have you heard about the new iMac? Their eyes start spinning counterclockwise, and they want to save you because they believe in the product so much, because the culture promotes a sense that Apple is here to change the world. And Steve Jobs, 50 years ago, but now he's dead, said, we want to be insanely great. And that vision was so compelling, the people live it today, even though he's physically gone. Take that on. Take that on in your life, in your business, in your family, in your church, in your school. Be the inspirational leader that, even if you're the only one that does it, is there to be a seed of an enlightened, inspired, values-based culture that lifts up the human spirit and condition rather than reaffirms its distrust of life.
Everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fourth Level Conversations with Al Colleen and Stacey Harding. We're glad to be with you again today. Al, it's great to see you as always, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I always look forward to them, Stacey, because I find they clarify the calm perspective of truth in my mind when you and I gather together to try to share some ideas for people to consider in navigating the flow of their life down the river of eternity.
We were chatting this morning before we jumped on our recording, and we were thinking about where people might be in their life and business today. And there's so many different challenges that different industries are having and so forth. And we realized that whether it's professional or personal, the culture that we're a part of plays such an important role. And when there are challenging times in either business or life, it gets challenged. And I suppose it gets exposed as well. Do you have a foundation in your culture that is built for those times? Do you have that foundation in your own mental perceptions? And so we thought we might talk a little bit about that, Al. So maybe we can talk about, to start with, what does culture even mean?
Right.
How would someone personally think about that in their personal life? What role does faith and effort and going with the flow of life, what roles do those play?
What is culture, Stacey? What do you and what do most people seem to think of when you say this word, culture?
So I think for me, I would begin to think about it. Well, are we talking about a corporate culture if you're in business, or are we talking about the culture that I might have an ethnic background in? And so I think it's rooted in values. It's rooted in purpose and vision. And it's rooted in how we interact with one another as we travel through this life together. So I think if I were to just say it for myself, the culture is what perceptions, either in business or life, have been created around my values, the company's values, and my personal beliefs about life and the future and the vision that's all in that. So you I'm sure have a great definition.
Well, I don't know if I have a great definition, but it's interesting listening to your definition, because what's running through my mind as you use it is what an innately natural level 4 person you are. Because the way you define culture would be, in my connotation of culture, an enlightened culture that's values based, etc. I tend to go to more of a very objective, straightforward, larger description of culture if I were asked to define it for Webster or Wikipedia or whatever. And I believe culture are the conscious and unconscious agreements we have in our relationship with other people whenever two or more people are gathered for a purpose or with some commonality, whether that's race, working in a business, a family, a church. It's whenever you get people together, what the agreements are that they may or may not be aware of on how they're going to relate to each other, and then what they represent as a group to other cultures and other groups outside of that group. And there are, in my mind, level 3 ego-based cultures and level 4 values-based cultures. And I think they each have their consequence. And I think culture is such a fundamentally important thing because I think of Christ talking about when two or more gather in my name, that's a culture. When two people gather in the name of Christ, that's a Christ culture for those two or more, right? And so culture is the foundation upon any collective effort and work and relationship more than one person has, a group of people have that involves something. It may be honoring our race or our religious tradition. It may be being in a company that's selling widgets or mortgages or engineering products or whatever. But culture is really the foundation that everything else builds around. We tend to quickly, in leadership roles, flow to strategy and tactics and problem solving and profitability and all that. But all of it underlies the subtle environment of culture. Culture is the atmosphere of relationships that have a common identity, whether temporarily or permanently, would be, I guess, how I would look at it. And I think what you and I do, brother, and that I think is one possible trajectory of today's conversation, is talk about the criticality of culture for business leaders that is, in my experience, all too often ignored at the expense of the atmosphere and foundation for the value proposition, client relations, client experiences, and ultimately long-term survival. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that. And I think it's interesting. Just my experience of nearly 40 years in the business world and so forth, and being responsible for recruiting and growing production. I've watched so many companies talk about culture in that stage of the relationship with new prospective employees. And then once they're working together, they really don't talk about it anymore. And it seems like everyone presents that their culture is the differentiator. That's why you would want to be a part of this group of professionals and what we're doing in our industry. And some truly live it out, I think, and they seem to thrive. I think if we just look back, and there have been all kinds of books written by smarter people than me about the differentiation of great companies versus good ones. And oftentimes it comes down to how that leader or that leadership team has lived out culture in their interactions with their teams and their customers and their referral partners and all those things that become stakeholders in the organization. But I think people don't address it often enough, and they just assume that, well, we told you about it. If it's changed, we'll let you know. But it's not really that simple. And in particular, when adversity comes and challenge comes, that's when people will experience the trueness, and authenticity of that culture and how it's described. Do we live it out under stress, or do we just live it out when we're able to celebrate because everything's gone so beautifully? And we want it to be experienced in both cases, right? And I think that's how leaders create long-term retention, and they attract the best people. And I think that if I were recommending to any leader at this stage in our history in this country in particular, really focus in on your ability to communicate your culture and demonstrate it to your teams, because it'll attract people. People want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of something they believe in and that they can be inspired by. And it doesn't have to be that you're going to, become number one in an industry, for an example. But maybe it's in our pursuit of excellence. Here's the things we're going to do to impact your lives, your family's lives, and our customers' lives. And let's get behind it. And there are plenty of examples in the world that we could talk about where we're seeing that happen. What do you think, Al?
Yes, I think brilliantly put. I think our relationship with culture reveals our relationship prioritization and valuation of relationships themselves, of people rather than processes. I think so often companies portray that they have a culture that's going to be enjoyable for employees that turns out not to be. You and I have this joke that I heard long ago that I think is hilarious that I'm going to take a minute and share with people, because we don't joke on this podcast. We're serious and intellectual. So I'm going to share a joke with you that I guarantee you're going to find interesting, I believe. So this is the joke I tell people when it comes to recruiting people and to being recruited, because right now you and I have deep backgrounds in the mortgage industry. There's a lot of moving around. There's a lot of changing, there's a paradigm shift going on that's really challenging mortgage cultures that you and I happen to specialize in helping people adapt to this new paradigm and build it into a positive quality of growth and surviving in this tough climate. So the way this joke goes is this: a guy dies and he goes in front of St. Peter, and it's like he walks up to a desk and St. Peter's there, and he says, "Wow, and I'm glad that I'm still here in some dimension. What happens now?" And Peter kind of looks up from his notes and says, "Well, you get to decide. You go into heaven or you go into hell." "I get to decide?" "Yeah, you get to decide." "Well, how do I know what to choose?" "I think I know, but how do I know?" "Go take the elevator and go visit them both." I can go, "Yeah, all right." So he goes over, there's an elevator. He goes over, he gets on the elevator. "I better start with hell, because I think I know what it is. I think it'll be an easy decision, right?" He goes down to hell. The elevator's door open, and it's Pebble Beach. And it's a sunny day. The birds are tweeting, the postman's whistling, the bluebirds are singing. There's elegant people dressed over having an elegant dinner party, and there's free food and drinks, and there's music. And these guys walk up to him dressed beautifully and they say, "Hey, you want to play some golf?" Okay. He plays golf at Pebble Beach. Never got to do it when he was alive. He had right behind he used to play golf at Pebble Beach. And has a fabulous round of golf, has a lot of fun. They drink beer, they do it, and he gets done. He's like, "I'll see you fellas, probably sooner than you think." Yeah, gets back on the elevator, and now he goes up to heaven. And he gets there, and the door's open, and it's white clouds, and it's a lot of old men smiling at him that are playing harps and eating honey. Okay, all right, got it. All right, thank you. Gets back on the elevator after a short visit, goes back to the middle ground. Who would call me during a podcast? And so he goes back to the middle ground, and the middle area, gets off the elevator and goes back to the desk, and he tells St. Peter, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I think I choose hell." Okay, there you go. He gets on the elevator, goes back down, the door's open, and now this is a scene out of Mad Max. It's dark. It's shadowy. There are demons that have hot coals, and they're whipping people that are pulling these sleighs, and it's what he always thought of as hell. And one of the guys pulling a sleigh, he stops and says, "Hey, buddy, what's going on? I was here yesterday. You and I played golf. What the heck happened here?" And the guy looks up at him and says, "Oh, yesterday you were a recruit. Today you're staff." Now,
I wonder if that's how people feel sometimes.
I think they feel oftentimes. How many times? I mean, this has happened a lot in my life and over the last 25 years coaching people, where people get all excited. "I'm going to go to this place and they're going to give me this, give me that." "No, man, it just seems like it solves all my problems." And they get there, and it may take 30 days. It may take 90 days, but ultimately they discover the Wizard of Oz and they realize they were sold a bill of goods. It's not horrible, but it's not real different from what they left. Maybe it's got a little better pricing or a little better commissions, a little better this, a little worse in other areas. And therefore, that automatically creates a seed of disappointment within them that tends to grow with time. So they start to look and notice what other things aren't what they had hoped for. And that, unfortunately, is the relationship too many people have with the culture of business. And businesses don't seem to understand it enough to deal with it. So they just turn people over. You know, Stacey, you were an executive forever and you hired a lot, you sent a lot packing. And there's times it's time to part. I get it. But let me ask the business leaders out there, honestly, how many people have left your company, your value proposition, because of their disappointment in the culture? I think that and micromanaging managers that use their power as a throne of enforcement and of requirement are the two top reasons people leave. Yeah, they want more pay, they want, but mostly they leave over cultural issues or poor management issues. And you and I today, my friend, as always on these podcasts, I think are on a mission of mercy for any of the leaders out there that are hearing what we're saying, to realize culture, if you leave it by itself, what's going to happen to your family culture if you let it go by itself and you all just do what you want to do and hope it turns out? The worst aspects of each of you may come forth and ruin the family. It does a lot of families. But if you as a leader take on the responsibility to realize my number one job it starts with is to create a culture that sets the environment up for people to give more than they take, to operate from the values that Brother Stacey's talking about are possible, to have a shared vision grounded in my personal vision of having something that matters more to me than just the paycheck, to be in the service of a sacred mission to me that inspires me, that has me feel like I'm doing more than moving widgets around on the production line in service of a paycheck. I am fulfilling my life's destiny through the quality of growth and connection and intention and action that my soul yearns for through this job, because I have a culture around me that sees it that way and encourages and supports me to do that, rather than have me just turn into a widget in an economic machine. What do you think, Stace?
I think that this is so critical for people, and it's critical for leaders. It's critical for people who work under leaders. And a former CEO I worked with for 2 decades used to say this: everybody's demo looks good. And that's the Pebble Beach experience in hell, right? Everybody's demo looks good, but is the truth of that culture evident? And how can you validate that? And I think about this. I think so many people, when they're being recruited to another organization, they're looking typically because something isn't working where they are. As you described, it could be the culture, it could be poor. They've got a leader that is a poor manager on top of it. But sometimes it's because they're pursuing more money, they're pursuing opportunities that maybe they didn't get where they were. And so it's easy to get influenced in that process. And so I guess the question that we start to pose is, how can you validate that culture? And there's different ways. Obviously, you can look at the leader and how are they respected in their industry and what they're doing. What is their turnover? Why have people left? I used to really encourage people when I was recruiting, call anybody in our company and talk about, the organization, the culture, the support, all those things. And let me give you a list of people who've left in the last year. Call them too.
That's great.
Because if you call someone who's left, you're going to get at least some indication of what they thought of the organization. Now, if it's all bad, it might be because they weren't performing or whatever, and we had to let them go. But at the other side of it, at least you get a balance for the demo, right? You got the demo that says everything's wonderful and all those things. I used to encourage people also when they were meeting with leaders in the organization, ask people who are in those roles, what keeps you up at night about the company? What are you thinking about at 3 a.m. that needs to be fixed? And I want to give you a word of caution. If they say, I can't think of anything, you're getting a demo. And be cautious. The more authentic people are on their weaknesses and their shortcomings, the more true and authentic that culture likely is for what you're hearing about it.
That's beautiful. And I want to do something that you and I don't do on these podcasts, Stacey. We don't market ourselves. We aren't busy driving to the hoop saying you should call us so we can have a conversation. But now I'm going to violate that rule. And I'm going to suggest that any leader in any culture, now that may just mean you're the head of a household and the culture is the family. It might be you run a multi-billion-dollar company. It may be your church group. It may be your schoolroom. I don't know. Any leader who is charged with the responsibility to have guidance and influence over a culture should contact Stacey or myself to have a conversation, because culture isn't innate, it's learned. And if you don't, and so this is my opinion, culture breaks down into two categories: effective or ineffective. Ineffective cultures are level 3 cultures that are really grounded in egos. And therefore, the people at the top of the house create a culture that reflects their ego, which creates resentment from people down line that may not like that ego, may not agree with how that ego sees the world, doesn't want to live in a culture of work where all I'm here to do is worship the boss so that they feel good about themselves, which is sadly more predominant than not in most businesses. We give lip service to being more than that, but when you go down the elevator the second time to where you go to join a place and you finally fit in, be in a place 90 days and then see how much the place reflects what they said they were. A level 3 culture, there will be a huge disparity between what they said and what they are. And that is the first crack in the cement that will ultimately have you eventually break away. Now, a level 4 culture by design is not about ego, personality, or affirmation of the leader's worldview. Level 4 cultures are values-based cultures, beginning with a leader that's a values personified individual. Their consciousness sees the world in terms of embodying values, not promotion of ego interests or personalities. Therefore, they talk about a future in such a way that they inspire other people to see their future in it. And people believe them because they experience them consistently as being an experience of values. I believe this is who you were in all your career, Stacey, from what I knew. And I knew you at a distance. I didn't know you correct. But I don't think anybody I know of ever thought you were insincere, you were dishonest, you were egocentric in terms of being just selfish and self-concerned. I think you were consistently seen as a man who was very convicted in his relationship with his faith and in treating people as best he could in alignment with that faith. And as a result, they may have liked what you paid them or not. They may have left you or not. But I don't know of anybody that would ever say that they didn't respect you, because you created that impression. You earned that impression of being a values personified guy. This is what has to be learned, is to be a level 4 leader that creates a level 4 culture as the foundation of the trajectory of your business interests that will have a huge influence over the likely upward spiral of that business through people and processes and products and services or not. And it's the number one problem I see in coaching business leaders, is that they take culture for granted. If you take culture for granted, your people will feel taken for granted, and they ultimately will be a competing commitment to what it is you wish to accomplish. You as a leader have to have a larger architecture of commitment to something beyond your own self-image and how wealthy you are and how much is in it for you, because you reflect the culture and the culture influences the people. And if you are selfish, you will create a culture like that that will be dysfunctional. If you are selfless, you will create that. And that's your opportunity in business that will also pay out more so than a level 3 coach. What are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah. Oh, it's perfect. And I thought about something we might offer to our leaders about how they are portraying their culture in this day and age of social media. I've created kind of I guess, a little training around this idea of lessons from the executive chair, so to speak. And it's more about what not to do than it is what to do. But I think so often we talk about our company's culture is about the organization of team members, employees, their families, our customers, and all that. And it could be very well true at the heart of the leader who wrote that and so forth. But unintentionally, they go on vacations. They experience a private jet. They experience another car. And they are proud of those things. And they take pictures and they post them in social media. And there's nothing wrong with accumulating nice things in life. We work hard for it and all those things. But if you're a leader, be careful about that because it can be misinterpreted so easily by your team, especially in difficult times where maybe they've seen some of their colleagues have to be downsized because an industry has challenged. And we want to be careful. It doesn't mean that we're trying to portray an image that isn't real about ourselves, but just be careful. You've got, as a leader, people are watching. I guess that's the point, right? They're watching what your culture really is. And the definition of the culture that they experience is how they observe you living inside of that. And so I just was thinking about that, Al, that I think it's important that not only do we write things down, we communicate them, but we live them out. And I think it's dangerous in this day of social media and people are scrolling all day long trying to find something and they want to connect with their leader. And if they see different behavior outside of the office than they do in, they're going to wonder if what's in is real or not. I don't know. Maybe that was just a sidebar that's not that important.
No, I think it's brilliantly true. And I'm ashamed to admit I was that boss at one moment. I had this is a true story. When I had my mortgage company, you know, mortgage world is volatile and you go through times where people come and go and sometimes people don't work out. And we were at, I don't even remember exactly what the circumstance was, but back when I was even more shallow than I am now, I was big with the cars. And so I've owned all sorts of luxury cars, and I just bought a new Porsche, and I was excited about it and proud of it, and I was always very personally connected with my employees, which is wonderful to a point, but you have to also realize its consequence. So I'd gotten this car, and I took my underwriter out. Hey, you got to see this thing. I took her outside because I'd looked at them as works of art. Isn't it beautiful? And she got so pissed at me. She went off on me like, yeah, right. You just bought a new Porsche, and we had to let Susie Q go last week. And then I realized, oh my God, it never occurred to me. My unconsciousness cost me in the eyes of that valuable employee of being a selfish hypocrite. And perhaps I was. So we have discussed a valuable thing today. And not just if you're the CEO of a company, but if you're a mother, if you're a father, if you're a member of a small church in Dubuque, Iowa, if you're a school teacher, if you're running or involved with being a part of any group of people, which all of us are, leave today's podcast with a reconsideration of the criticality of an enlightened, supportive, uplifted, inspired culture that grows people's trust of life rather than reaffirms their distrust of life. And make yourself responsible, even if you're the receptionist. You might have an asshole for a CEO. Sorry for the language. You can edit that out. But you might have a jerk for the CEO. But if you have the right person, even when you walk into the lobby greeting people, back when we had lobbies before COVID masks, even if when you walk in the lobby, your impression of the culture begins with the first person they see and how they're treated. As we close today, let me ask you, what is the difference in impression you get when you walk into and no, I'm not trying to offend any group here, but when you walk into a post office at 5 minutes to 5 with a package and there's a line, and you see these hardworking postal workers who've been behind the counter all day that are frustrated, want to get home to their families, and they're looking at the clock, they can't wait to shut the cage so they can stop. Now you realize this is merely a transactional relationship with the culture of the post office at 5 minutes to 5. And then walk into an Apple store, and what you get is no longer just a place to sell you electronics. You get religion. Have you heard about the new iMac? Their eyes start spinning counterclockwise and they want to save you because they believe in the product so much, because the culture promotes a sense that Apple is here to change the world. And Steve Jobs, 50 years ago, before now he's dead, said, we want to be insanely great. And that vision was so compelling, the people live it today, even though he's physically gone. Take that on. Take that on in your life, in your business, in your family, in your church, in your school. Be the inspirational leader that, even if you're the only one that does it, is there to be a seed of an enlightened, inspired, values-based culture that lifts up the human spirit and condition rather than reaffirms its distrust of life. I'll let you close it out, brother.
Yeah, that was a brilliant description, and I was thinking about this as leaders. We're not suggesting you have to be perfect, because you can't be, and you wouldn't be trustworthy if you were. What we are saying is that if you can be clear about your culture based upon your values and what you want, and if your mind and your perception is always on the well-being of others above yourself, you'll have no worries about your culture. And here's what culture really is. It's what people experience. What you described, Al, was an experience in the post office, an experience at the Apple store. It's all about experiences, which forms our narratives and our perceptions.
Right.
And so if we can create an experience for people as leaders that every time they meet with us, they feel good leading, even if it's a difficult subject. I'm not saying there aren't challenges, but it's how we make people feel as leaders. That's culture. That's an attractive culture that will attract people, retain people. And here's the thing, you win when you have that kind of culture deliverance and experience. So we hope this has been valuable for you. Al and I love doing it. I think we benefit the most, but hopefully you got something out of it, and we can't wait till the next time. Brother, love you. Thank you for always doing this with me. It's a pleasure.
Love you, brother. We have a good culture.
We do. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.